Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Jennifer Kron, the Deputy Chief Information Officer at the National Security Agency. Jennifer, great to have you on the program.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And we've been exploring how defense and intelligence agencies have moved into the cloud to a certain extent over the past several years and what their plans are for the future. So just to kind of set the stage here, where is the NSA at in its journey with cloud computing and how that fits into its kind of broader IT modernization?
Absolutely. So we at NSA are on a multi-year, multi-cloud journey. This journey has multiple components. It has a wide variety of partners. So it's all about identifying and selecting and leveraging the right cloud for the mission. So that's where we're focused right now. So as I said, there's a number of different components. I think some of them we can get into a little bit more detail later in the conversation. I'll start by mentioning the Hybrid Compute Initiative, or HCI, which has two parts to it. There is a commercial cloud, and then there's some hardware as a service. The commercial cloud part is a classified NSA top secret instance of a commercial cloud ecosystem for our core products. But we also have, as part of HCI, hardware as a service, where for certain things that we can't move yet, at least to a commercial cloud, we're renting the bare bones hardware that we can build upon. So that's one part of our cloud journey. Another part that I'll mention is the Human Capital Management System, which is a contract that we recently let to Oracle. And that's all about modernizing our human capital. And this will take control of all of our major HCA functions, including workforce planning, external talent acquisition. And it's going to be bringing something to the workforce that we've been desperately needing, and that we realize there is an ideal solution available in the commercial world. So here is an example where we're choosing a purpose-built cloud solution where we determined that the industry solution really was the best one. In addition, there is, of course, C2S, soon to be C2E. We are users of it currently. We expect to leverage C2E as we continue our evolution from C2S to C2E. And NSA has a special role in C2E in that we are the sponsors for Microsoft. So overall, we're leveraging already a multitude of clouds with a multitude of commercial and other partners. There are some areas where we need to go to hardware as a service, but it's already about getting us out of the data center running business. And there's going to be even more opportunities in the future for us as we go along this multi-cloud journey.
Got it. All right. Well, a lot to unpack there. Maybe let's start with the Hybrid Compute Initiative. Can you talk a little bit more about how that has progressed, how you're kind of optimizing the different workloads that maybe go full cloud versus you keep on-prem and everywhere in between?
Definitely. So as I had said before, Hybrid Compute Initiative, or HCI, is just one example of cloud usage at NSA. So one part of it is the commercial cloud. So that is classified NSA TS instance of a commercial cloud system. And that's for our core products and services. It's got all of the benefits that you normally associate with commercial cloud. It's providing bulk buys and scalability exactly as we need it. But there's some things that we can't put on commercial cloud that we need because of special performance or cost or compliance requirements. We need to be able to specify it more. But we also want to get ourselves out of the on-prem data center owning and managing business. So the second part of Hybrid Compute Initiative, in addition to the commercial cloud, is hardware as a service, which is a separate part that we had contracted for. So that's, again, our attempt to minimize NSA on-premise data centers and our core IT refresh. So we're building the NSA software on that bare metal, but the vendor is in charge of the refresh and the patching, all up to NSA's security standards, but we're not as responsible for maintaining the data center. So it's sort of the best of both worlds for those, if you will, exotic pieces. So together, those two components of the HCI, that's where we're moving our core mission products and services over the next few years. It's largely about the IC Gov Cloud. And it's fundamentally really a different way of doing business at NSA. It's a major shift for us.
Yeah, I mean, what are some of the major hurdles that you've hurdled over to get to that point with the IC Gov Cloud, and what's next? What else has to be kind of tackled to get to that major shift?
As we're embarking on this journey to cloud computing, there are a number of challenges, some of which are just about the challenges that you encounter anytime you go to a new technology, and some of them are more specific to cloud. So one is, as I mentioned, we're on a multi-cloud journey. So integration and interoperability of multi-cloud, especially as it goes across different agencies and they all have different mission needs and accesses, that can be a real challenge. That's not a reason to not pursue a multi-cloud strategy. As I said, at NSA, we're really focusing on the right cloud or the right compute solution for each mission. But there is that added degree of difficulty of having to integrate and interoperate across the various clouds and the cloud providers. There's also some cost implications, not necessarily in terms of total cost, but in terms of, if you will, the optics. So for example, right now, customers don't always see the total cost of ownership because we just sort of account for what we're doing on premises in a certain bucket, and the consumers just see it as free. But once you start going to being able to track exactly what you're using, a lot of the functions that were previously absorbed by the enterprise, like power, space, and cooling and data center maintenance, that becomes part of the customer-facing bill. And so you need to account for people realizing that. There's also life cycle changes. So as you're converting over to the cloud, so it's going to be, as we shift over to HCI and we move all these massive things over there, that's a lot of work, that's a lot of energy, that's a lot of resources that will be something that we have to prioritize sometimes about in relation to other things that we need to be doing. So in the short term, sometimes things have to run in two places before you can shut down the first and build up the second. Other challenges on our journey to the cloud are keeping pace with vendor innovation and being able to make sure that our government processes, like for accreditation, are able to keep up with the speed of innovation in the private sector. And then you always come down to the people and the culture and just the knowledge and skill gaps that we may have as developers and systems administrators and security. In some ways, cloud is the natural evolution of where we've been going for years, but there are some things that are different, and we need to make sure that our workforce and our people understand where things might be a little more challenging or a slightly different way of approaching it.
Got it. And you mentioned at the top that you're the sponsor, the NSA is the sponsor for Microsoft on the C2E contract. I was wondering if you could explain a little bit more about what's involved with that.
Oh, sure. So NSA does have its special relationship with Microsoft, and something we've been really focusing on a great deal over the last couple of years is bringing the TS Microsoft Azure cloud to the entire IC. So the Azure cloud, it's a sovereign hyperscale cloud platform that will really bring a lot of capability to the IC and to DOD. And through the cloud, we'll get Microsoft products and services that include infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and Microsoft 365, which will replace Office 2019 products. Where we are in the movie right now is that the Azure Fabric itself achieved ATO in 2022. The services and features are authorized for use in the TS Azure cloud, and they can be accessed through C2E through the contract with Microsoft. So we partner with CIA on that. We are continuing to work with Microsoft, and they're continuing to do their engineering services to be able to provide Microsoft 365 at the TS level to the IC in the future.
Got it. It seems like a pretty big project from, especially from like a workforce productivity standpoint within the IC, right? Getting folks onto those more modern applications that, of course, we're all used to using now with the shift to more remote work, right? Is that kind of, I guess, a pretty big deal for your workforce in particular, not just as an IT sort of technology story?
Yes, I would think that too. It ties into the issue of being ready for the future workforce. We know and we joke that in the IC, young people see movies about the amazing technology in the intelligence community, and then even what they have at home, and then they're sometimes surprised that when they come in, what they see is Office 2019 or Windows 95 or something like that. And so part of it is trying to have a modernized infrastructure. And I think sometimes across the IC, we get very interested in investing in the technology that's more at the bleeding edge and the cool, sexy stuff. But we really need to make sure that we're investing in the fundamental everyday enterprise infrastructure services that enable everybody in the enterprise to be able to do their work and contribute to the mission.
And then sort of related to that, we've talked a little bit about the human capital management system with Oracle that you're now moving to. What's next in sort of implementation there? How is that going to move forward? And what do you think are the sort of big things that folks need to understand about that shift for the NSA?
I think it's going to finally deliver to the workforce what they've been needing for many years. And I've worked in a number of agencies across the U.S. government, not only in the IC. And unfortunately, our human capital management systems don't tend to be where we make the greatest investment in making sure that things are user-friendly and up to date and easy to operate. So I think this is one of those things that's going to really improve experience across the entire enterprise in a way that everybody can see and appreciate. And it's part of, we're looking across the board at all of our sort of business and management systems, not only mission systems, but also the things that keep the agency running and making sure that those are kept up to date and are, of course, secure.
And, are there any other examples of what the NSA is either already doing in a cloud environment or would like to do in a cloud environment that you'd like to share with us here today?
So we are currently users of C2S and are migrating some things to C2E that don't naturally fit into one of the other clouds that I had said we're already leveraging, such as through HCI. And we're right now thinking about the best way that we're going to be able to leverage C2E and the multiple providers through there. So we definitely look to be players in C2E and to be leveraging the strengths of all of the different cloud service providers who are involved with C2E. As well as we do anticipate there will continue to be more as we continue this journey, and we will have moved a lot of the big pieces to cloud, such as through the commercial cloud services of HCI, but there's always going to be additional that we need to be focusing on. So I see a lot of opportunity in the future for working with NSA for a variety of cloud service providers who bring different strengths and expertise to the table.
Got it. And I mean, that's a great way to move into the question just about what do you think are the big lessons learned after the last decade now of having C2S in place, a few years now with C2E. For folks who aren't aware, C2S was one cloud provider, C2E is multiple cloud providers on that contract. What do you think are the big lessons learned so far in that journey for you and your colleagues in the intelligence community?
Let me say first that I think it's we at the IC and DOD are absolutely, we've been on the right journey where you start out with sort of a single pathfinder as part of your first forays, your initial steps into the cloud world. And then it's been a natural next step as we go to C2E, and on the DOD side, they go to JWCC. I think some of the lessons learned. I remember in the very early days of iSight, there was a lot of misunderstandings and people saying, well, this is very important, it can't go to the cloud. This is very sensitive, it can't go to the cloud. So I think there's been a lot of education across all of government about how securely the cloud can be leveraged, and things that maybe we thought we wouldn't be comfortable moving to the cloud. We've overcome a lot of those misconceptions. Now, as I said, there are still some things that we are putting on hardware as a service because, again, they have very specific performance or cost constraints, or because of some of NSA's unique compliance requirements. But overall, the direction of the things that we as a community, when I remember the conversations we were having 10 years ago about what could move to C2S and then where agencies are now, it's been a huge evolution. And so we're ready to leverage C2E and to take advantage of that. But we are all really aware of the challenge of the multi-cloud environment and how we make sure that we're able to make all the clouds talk to each other, share data.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like such a crucial aspect to this. And I think obviously you've seen probably some evolution on the commercial side in that regard, being able to share data between different clouds. But obviously that's a big deal for the community, the intelligence community. You mentioned the iSight strategy. Can you talk a little bit about how that fits into this broader evolution, just being able to share data across the intelligence community, and just where is that at? I think the latest update to that has been out for several years now. Where do you think the IC is in that journey?
I'm very happy to answer questions about eyesight because I've been doing so for about 10 years now, because I've been involved with eyesight since about its inception, but from a variety of different positions, sometimes from the CFO side, sometimes from CIO side, sometimes from mission, from OD&I, from NSA now. What I will say is that the fundamental precepts, the fundamental objectives of eyesight have, I would say, stayed the same. And it's always been about greater interoperability and integration across the intelligence community. It's always been about improving security and about becoming more efficient, operating more efficiently. Now, the way that we thought we were going to achieve those things has evolved over the years, and I can talk a little bit about that. But those fundamental concepts, that the idea of eyesight is that we are an enterprise, we should work together so that our IT works with us as a team and not against us. And we can use that common baseline to ensure security, since a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, and to be more efficient. Notice I didn't say cost savings, I said efficiency. So a greater functionality and mission impact for our dollar. So we have evolved and changed over the years in how we're going to achieve those goals of interoperability and security and efficiency. So in the beginning, we really thought it was all about just these fundamental foundational services that we were going to share. We thought we were going to have one common desktop. Now, some of that has gone very well, such as C2S that we're continuing to use today. The idea of do in common what is commonly done. So that vision has evolved to also include the concept of federation. So it's okay if we don't all have exactly the same desktop, as long as we have the interoperability and the capability to work together. It doesn't all have to be exactly the same. It's all about being able to collaborate and integrate. Other ways I think eyesight has evolved is, in the early days, we were not exclusively, but mostly focused on the TS fabric. We were thinking just really about the U.S. intelligence community agencies. And we were really just thinking about within the continental United States, if not primarily within the DC area. So over time, we've realized that these same principles need to be extended. We need to be going out closer to the tactical edge. We need to be operating at secret and unclassed. And we were starting to come to that realization before COVID, but that certainly drove it home if we didn't get that already. And then we also have, over time, even more strongly recognized the importance of being able to collaborate with our partners. And that includes other agencies outside the IC, DOD, industry, academia, and even as appropriate, our foreign partners. So that's how I see eyesight has been evolving. So we still have a very tight-knit CIO group across the intelligence community, and we're all still focused on how we can work better together in a secure and efficient way.
Got it. That's a fascinating perspective on how things have really evolved. But it's interesting that the fundamental concepts have stayed the same. The fundamental, goals there. When you're talking about just shifting from worrying about the top secret fabric, primarily in the DC region, to tactical edge across the world, secret and even unclass, how has that manifested itself, I guess, in what you're doing with technology over the last few years? Maybe it's some of the things we've already talked about today, but maybe it's with the cloud, maybe not. But how is that changing maybe what you're doing at the NSA that maybe you weren't doing even 2 or 3 years ago?
There has been, in the last few years, but even predating COVID, NSA has been focused on low-side development for software. So that's something where, again, we were already on that journey, and COVID very much accelerated it. But we are committed to supporting development on the low side, because we know that's where you've got better resources, that's where you've got a lot more people. You can bring in a much broader variety of folks to collaborate and tools. And then as things are ready to be moved up to the high side. So that was something that we began to develop well before COVID, and then continued to evolve it. So we do have a secure development environment on the low side that's been really important to NSA, and that we're going to continue to develop and support.
That's interesting. I think the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency has articulated something similar with their DevSecOps framework, where it's the data that's classified, but the software itself, the architecture might and the development might not be classified until you put the data into it, right? Is that kind of the same thing with what you're doing?
Exactly. Now you do have to be careful because sometimes there can be enough things that are not classified, if seen all together, can start to give away something. So we do have to be careful about that. But yes, and NGA's has done some great work on the low side.
Got it. And then you talked about how, it really is with eyesight, all about collaboration. Even if you're not doing exactly the same thing, making sure that you can interoperate and work together. But one thing I've heard come up a lot lately is the services of common concern within the IC. And I think for folks outside the intelligence community might not totally be aware of what those are. Can you kind of explain how those work and maybe where NSA is a service of common concern?
Services of common concern are a critical mechanism for the intelligence community to basically achieve the objectives we are talking about of eyesight, of greater interoperability and security and efficiency. It really is about, rather than developing the same thing, say maybe 18 times, we take somebody who is doing the best of breed and using that across the community. As for example, we were talking about C2S, that CIA is a service provider for C2S, rather than each of the components having to go and individually negotiate with all of the cloud service providers for C2E. So services of common concern, AKA SOCs, if an agency is designated as a service provider for a service of common concern, then they have the framework and the authorities and the funding models to be able to offer that service to any other component of the intelligence community. It doesn't necessarily mean being designated a service provider doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get money for it. Sometimes it means that you will be operating under a fee-for-service model. Sometimes it makes more sense for it to be centrally funded. So if it's something that is very difficult to nail down exactly who is benefiting where, and it just makes more sense for everybody, such as things that would benefit security for all of the community. So services of common concern, again, are really important at a way that we are able to progress I would say, the principles of eyesight. NSA is one of the most active SOC providers, as well as a very avid user. So some of the SOCs that we are service providers for. So first is the IC Gov Cloud. That's a high performance data discovery, fusion, and knowledge sharing environment. Provides secure big data analytics at scale. And that started out as something that NSA was building for itself and is now making key parts available to the rest of the community. As I mentioned before, that's what we're now migrating over to hybrid compute initiative rather than having it in on-prem. We are also among the providers for IC Data Services, which provides IC agencies with a set of end-to-end services to ingest and manage their data in IC analytic tools. We are service providers for the IC Information Transport Services, Service of Common Concern, along with some other agencies. Some of the other services of common concern for which NSA is a service provider are ICAM, aka Identity, Credential, and Access Management. That provides federated ICAM service capabilities for security. We provide Intel Link, which is collaboration capabilities that go beyond just the U.S. intelligence community. It's also all of our mission partners. There's actually 102 organizations that use Intel Link to share information. And Intel Link's on 3 different fabrics. It's on TS, secret, and unclassified. A service that used to be a standalone service of common concern is the IC Applications Mall. That was one of the original eyesight services. It has now been transitioned into the Intel Link program, so it continues there as part of Intel Link. And then finally, NSA is a service provider for the very newest and most recently designated service of common concern, and that's the Five Eyes Enterprise Collaboration Communication Services. So NSA has always had very robust communication and collaboration capabilities with its Five Eyes partners, with whom we operate very closely. And this service of common concern will authorize us to be able to extend those capabilities to other IC agencies that they may use then to communicate with their own Five Eyes partners. So we have been designated for that. Right now, we're working on the memorandum of understanding that gets into the details of exactly how it'll be provided. So those are the services of common concern that NSA is the provider for. There's also, in addition, sometimes enterprise license agreements. So rather than for enterprise licenses, so as an example for Zoom or something, rather than, again, having all 18 agencies navigate, negotiate individually, we get the best deal we can for the IC. We are also at NSA consumers and participants in some of the services of common concern that are offered by other service providers. Some of these are ones that are sort of underlying services that you benefit from, whether you realize it or not. So, for example, IC network requirements and engineering is one. The IC Security Coordination Center, the Commercial Cloud Enterprise, C2E, the successor is C2S, as we've talked about quite a bit already. And then one of the other newer ones, the IC end-to-end security protections, which is a suite of applications that uses cloud services to keep our most sensitive data holdings secure, but able to be shared.
And so it sounds as if the services of common concern have really grown quite a bit. I'm wondering, how have they evolved from when you first kind of conceived of them and signed off on them?
So in the beginning of OD&I, there was a thing that was not called services of common concern. It was called executive agents. And that was sort of the concept that agencies would be designated as executive agents for various things. And so, for example, I believe in the early days, CIA was at one point designated as the executive agent for the open source enterprise, which at the time, the open source center. But there was not a lot of agreement on what it actually meant to be an executive agent and what the rules were around that. Did it mean you get money? Did it mean other people had to use those services? So there was a lot of misunderstanding and agencies signing up to be executive agents and then feeling like they were stuck with the bill. So that has been something that's changed. I'll also say, of course, in the really early days of after the Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act, there wasn't a lot of history of our banding together and acting as a community. So just in the very early days, just the concept of enterprise license agreements and executive agents, there had been some precedent, but it wasn't as common a way to do business as we have now. So some of the things that have evolved are that we've really refined the rules and the expectations about what it is to be a service provider for a service of common concern. One of the stipulations is that agencies the direction is, please consider using a service of common concern before you choose to build something that is specially created for you. So we put that expectation. It's not an all one size fits all, but it's kind of putting that expectation that when we as a community decide, because it is a community decision now to designate something as a service of common concern, it's with the expectation that that's in a lot of cases going to be the best solution. Not always, and there's always going to be exceptions, and that's okay. So that's one way that the services of common concern have evolved, just in our understanding of what it is to be an executive agent. And just that concept that we're stronger together. And if one agency is doing something well, we should learn from that and see how we can leverage it to the best of our abilities.
Got it. It seems like that makes a lot of common sense. See what everyone else is doing first before you go off and do your own thing. But I think federal agencies across the board, not just in the intelligence community, sometimes can struggle with that, right?
And sometimes it's based on misconceptions. Of course, every agency, including every agency I've ever worked with, thinks they're very special and their requirements are very particular. And sometimes that is true. But sometimes also the services of common concern can be adjusted. We can change it we can add new capabilities to accommodate the requirements of agencies that maybe weren't participants in it before. So that's something that has evolved as well, the recognition that we can adapt services of common concern to meet the requirements of different agencies. And sometimes it's just a matter of education, of helping agencies understand something might exist that you could adapt or adopt rather than having to create your own. So one of the benefits of services of common concern is the authority that it provides to the service providers. Because there is prohibitions on augmenting appropriations for between one agency and another. So if, just for example, NSA is doing something that another agency thinks might be worthwhile and they would like to use that service, it can be a really time-consuming and mind-numbing process of a variety of memorandums of understanding and how you're going to transfer the funding. And it can be a lot of paperwork and a lot of difficulty. So one of the advantages of services of common concern is that it really streamlines that. So it is absolutely possible for one agency to provide a service to another under different legislative statutory mechanisms, but it's just a whole lot easier once you have the service of common concern designation.
Got it. Yeah, that seems pretty crucial. Everyone's always worried about where the funding is going to come from, right? So that's understandable. Well, one thing that obviously cuts across every organization out there is cybersecurity. And I wanted to ask, I think last year we saw President Biden sign, that national security memorandum on improving cybersecurity in DOD and IC systems. You talked about how the IC maybe has kind of moved past this stigma attached with the cloud being insecure, but obviously you still have to be smart about how you do it. What progress are you seeing on the cybersecurity front within this sort of modernization conversation?
With all of the enhanced focus on cybersecurity and zero trust in the public sphere over the last year or so, I have been really proud to be at NSA. Because they are an agency that has been doing zero trust since before it was called zero trust, who have been really at the forefront of cybersecurity. So in a lot of ways, all of this recent focus on zero trust, whether it be in the cloud or elsewhere, it's not new for NSA. It's just a heightened focus to implement the proven best practices. And we're really happy to share those with our partners across the IC and DoD. So this, like our cloud journey, is a journey that we've been on for many years, continually improving and implementing common security standards and practices that cut across all of our infrastructures. You had mentioned cloud. So the difference that comes up with cloud tech, and to some degree, cybersecurity is cybersecurity. But there are some different features about cloud, and a lot of that is about the fact that when you're using commercially managed clouds, is mostly what we're talking about here, is that we don't own and operate and manage the infrastructure anymore. So we've always applied defense in depth as part of our cybersecurity approach. And that means that you start with defending the infrastructure on the outside and then you build your way in. Now, when you don't own and operate the infrastructure, as well as the operating systems and the applications and the data, when you're using the commercially provided cloud systems, you have to understand what it is that they are providing at those levels that they own, that it meets your standards, and that you understand exactly where the line is and where you fully take over. So instead of just saying we've got it from the outside in, we need to understand exactly what they're doing on their layers, make sure that it meets all of our standards, and that we understand where our layers start. So we have to have that really close collaboration with the cloud service provider. So that also means that when we use cloud technologies, it's an even greater focus on identity management and access control, data protection, and monitoring of that virtual environment, all of the things that are directly under our control. So when we talk about zero trust, that's always had a very data-centric focus. It also includes defense in depth, as I was talking about. So the totality of IT security principles, it really hasn't changed whether you're talking about defense in depth or zero trust, whether you're in cloud or not in cloud. It's all a matter of focus and who is providing what part of the security stack. Sometimes zero trust is associated with cloud because of that data-centric focus, but zero trust is, of course, not just about cloud technologies. Zero trust is something that's been embedded in IT and data security since the beginning. It's just a matter of implementation, and you had talked before about the challenge of funding and some agencies having to make the trade-off there to be able to address the threats to their environment. For NSA, it's always been a top priority. So zero trust, the renewed focus on zero trust is not something new to us. It's everyone's starting to speak our language, if you will. And we are aware of we've always been applying those same principles to the cloud, but that's sort of the distinction, is understanding when we don't own the infrastructure, what is being provided at that level in the stack.
Got it. Yeah, and we just saw DoD come out with its big zero trust strategy, kind of setting a goal to reach a sort of standard level of maturity across many different components of zero trust by 2027. But here in 2023, I don't know, can you guys give us a status update on where you think maybe the NSA and the IC are at in that journey? What do you think are some important things to keep an eye on here over the next year or so?
I think NSA is in a really good position. I am comfortable saying that. NSA has been doing zero trust. We have for many years. We have implemented best practices. As I said before, zero trust was called zero trust. It's how we were operating. I can't speak for the IC as a whole. I will say that the IC is looking very carefully at DOD strategy. And given that there are a number of the IC agencies are also DOD agencies, we're definitely trying to align our processes between IC and DOD, having variations if they're applicable, but in general, trying to institute that very high standard across the board.
So one thing you mentioned at the top when we were talking about the shift to cloud was making sure the workforce understands the changes that are happening. And I was wondering if I could get you to expand on that a little bit more. You know, what are some of the things that you need to do in terms of, I don't know, you're talking about training and upskilling to take advantage of, you know, cloud-based applications and doing things differently, you know, change management. I could throw a million buzzwords at you, but in terms of the workforce, what do they really need to understand here?
Speaking of buzzwords, I'm going to steal a quote from one of my former bosses and mentors, Stephanie O'Sullivan, when she was the principal deputy DNI and we were talking about eyesight. She would say, "We are building the community a Porsche. We don't want them to drive it like a Hyundai." Like essentially, we need to make sure that as we're bringing these state-of-the-art capabilities to the workforce, that we're able to take advantage of it and to leverage it. I will say at NSA, I would never say that NSA is an agency where they need a lot of upskilling in their technology. I think one of the things that is a common challenge in very technologically advanced workforces is ensuring that that we don't rely very much on sort of homegrown things, things that folks may have developed themselves and maybe are out of date and have security issues, that we're able to have controlled IT across the enterprise. So that can be a little bit of a challenge in a very technologically advanced workforce. I'm often asked about what technology capabilities that people at NSA need. Especially as we're trying to have a future-ready workforce and be ready for the next generation, and ensure that the team that we have now are happy and healthy and have everything that they need to be successful. So certainly we need those technical skills, and we are always in the market for mathematicians and data scientists. But I will also say that there is a very large need at NSA for people to provide a wide range of other services. We need lawyers and budget people, and pretty much any skill you have, we can put to use. I think that one of the biggest challenges I've seen in the IC, and maybe across the whole U.S. government, is that we don't always have a lot of folks who can translate very technical concepts into the high level view that makes sense to policymakers, to folks who have to make the big decisions. And sometimes I'm concerned that we have these amazingly brilliant folks who are developing cutting edge technologies, but if we're not able to translate what they're doing and explain why it needs to be appropriately resourced and prioritized, then we run the risk of not being in the right place in the future. So I think it's incredibly important that we have not only the technical workforce, but all of the people to support all of the various functions of NSA. And then perhaps most crucially, people who can speak both languages, who are able to take these very technical concepts and translate them into concepts that people who are perhaps extremely intelligent, but not as well versed in the specifics of that specific area, so that they're able to make the best possible policy and budget decisions.
So it sounds like your ideal candidate would be a mathematician with a minor in English.
Yes, if you know someone like that, please send them our way.
Got it. Got it. And I should note the NSA recently announced it was launching one of its biggest hiring surges in 3 decades, with openings for over 3,000 new employees. That was announced just in January. I don't know if there's a plug from the CIO office specifically. Are there any things that you're hiring for, or openings, or anything you'd want to mention here?
I would say that our hiring initiative, Hiring Palooza, is a top priority for everybody in the agency from the director on down, and that certainly applies to CIO. We have an unending list of requirements and places where we feel like we could make a difference. And we have some amazing opportunities for, again, not just, so especially people with technical skills and degrees, but also for people with a wide range of skills. I'll also note that NSA has a lot of programs that will allow people to continue their education and their training while working here.
Got it. Well, in the couple of minutes we have left, I just wanted to ask if there's anything else that's on your mind that you think is particularly important to mention, especially as you look to the future. I mean, we haven't talked too much about future technologies, but obviously there's a lot to worry about coming down the pipeline, whether it's quantum or artificial intelligence or whatever. So what's kind of in your crystal ball, I guess, in the future?
On AI ML, it's definitely all about how do we bring sort of cutting edge capabilities into the everyday and use it to make humans more effective and to free up humans to do the things that only they can do. So that's also a journey that we're well along with, having traversed the valley of death between the research side and the capabilities side. So that's something that is definitely one of our top priorities going forward, is AI ML, but not just like what's really cool, but what can we put into practice at scale to expand what NSA is able to deliver to warfighters and policymakers. That's something that I will say on AI. Across the board, we are looking to develop modernized platforms, both for our mission and for our business capabilities. As I had mentioned before, we need to make sure that we're investing in business as well as the mission side. You had mentioned before DevSecOps, and I was in a meeting the other day. Something that is part of my job and that I feel strongly about is the importance of IT accessibility, of ensuring that our technology is accessible to persons with disabilities. And we were having a conversation and someone said, you know, we learned how to build security from the beginning. So we call it DevSec. First it was DevOps, then it's DevSecOps. Now we need to start talking about DevSec accessibility ops, which doesn't roll off the tongue. I would say we probably also need to work privacy in there as well. So it gets to be quite a mouthful when you're saying, yes, I'm working on DevSec accessibility privacy ops. So perhaps we won't go that way. But I do think the same way that we had learned that security can't be a bolt-on at the end of development, it needs to be something that's there from the beginning. We're also increasingly realizing that we need to do the same with accessibility and with privacy. And so that would be something that a message that I'd have for industry is that's sort of the direction we're going. It's a lot easier and cheaper to build these requirements in from the beginning rather than trying to retcon them and get it right at the end.
Got it. Well, that's a great way to end it, with some, really helpful specifics on what you're looking for from a technology perspective at NSA. So again, I'd like to thank today's guest, Jennifer Kron, the Deputy Chief Information Officer for the National Security Agency. Jennifer, thanks again for joining the program.
Thanks so much, Justin.
And again, I'm your moderator, Justin Doubleday. You're listening to Federal News Network. Now let me send you back to the studio for more on the DOD Cloud Exchange.